Have you ever felt like you were pouring your entire soul into a black hole, giving your love, your energy, your patience to someone who treated it like a convenience, an option, a slight inconvenience? You were bending over backwards, making yourself smaller, quieter, less needy, just hoping for a scrap of their attention, a crumb of their affection. And what did you get in return? A wall, a cold shoulder, a distant, vacant stare that made you question your own reality. You started to ask yourself, what is wrong with me? Why am I not enough to make them stay? Why am I not enough to make them choose me? Let me tell you something right now, and I need you to hear this with every fiber of your being. The problem was never you. It was never your capacity to love. The problem was in the receiving end. The problem was a void that you were trying to fill with your own light, a void that was so deep, so accustomed to the darkness, that it recoiled from the very warmth you offered. That person is an avoidant, and you have been operating on a fundamental lie, the lie that if you just love them enough, you can fix them. But listen to me, you cannot fix a broken system from the inside when you are the one being used as the band-aid. The only way, the only way, to break this toxic cycle, to reclaim your power, and to truly shock their system into a state of undeniable realization is to PPR, to remove the band-aid, to cut off the supply, to become a ghost in their world that once revolved around your constant presence. When you finally, decisively, and irrevocably lose access to you, that is when the real magic begins. That is when the tables turn. That is when the universe begins to work in your favor. Watch what happens next. The illusion of control shatters. Your absence becomes their uncontrollable variable. The withdrawal from the drug of your stability. They enter an emotional cold turkey. The echo chamber of their own making. Silence becomes a deafening teacher. The retroactive realization. Your value becomes crystal clear in hindsight. The ego's desperate gambit, testing the waters with low investment breadcrumbs. The panic of irrelevance, watching you move on while they are stuck. The collapse of the fantasy, comparing your substantial love to their superficial replacements. The inevitable hoovering attempt, the pullback before the final realization. Your unshakable frame, how your indifference becomes your ultimate power. The final reckoning, their loss becomes the catalyst for your unstoppable evolution. For the avoidant, the entire dynamic of the relationship was built upon a foundation of perceived control. This wasn't necessarily a malicious, calculated control, but a psychological one born from a deep-seated fear of engulfment and a primal need for self-preservation. They controlled the pace, the intimacy, the depth of the connection. They controlled it by pulling away when you got too close. They controlled it by becoming distant after a moment of vulnerability. They controlled it by setting the terms of engagement, keeping you in a constant state of uncertainty, which in turn kept you striving, chasing, and proving your loyalty. You were a predictable element in their unpredictable internal world. Your love was a constant they could rely on, not relying on. They operated with the unshakable, subconscious assumption that no matter how far they retreated, you would always be there, a steady beacon in their storm, waiting to welcome them back without consequence. Your presence was the anchor that allowed their ship to drift. It was the safety net that gave them the audacity to walk the tightrope of emotional unavailability. The moment you remove yourself, truly remove yourself, that entire illusion comes crashing down in a cacophony of silent chaos. The variable they took for granted, the one constant in their emotional equation, has suddenly vanished. And what happens to a system when its most critical constant is removed? It goes into shock. It malfunctions. It begins to question its own fundamental programming. Your absence becomes a black hole in the center of their reality, a gravitational pull they did not account for. They expected a protest, they expected a plea, they expected anger, tears, negotiations, all of which are forms of engagement, all of which are reactions that they can still, in some way, manage and control. Your silent, decisive absence is the one thing they have no playbook for. It is a non-reaction that speaks volumes. It is a void that echoes back their own emptiness. In their world of carefully managed distances and calculated withdrawals, your complete and total disappearance is the ultimate act of taking control. You are no longer playing the game on their board with their rules. You have taken the board, the pieces, and yourself, and you have walked away. This creates a cognitive dissonance so profound it forces a recalibration. They are left with the silence, And in that silence, they are forced to confront the one thing they've been running from: the consequences of their own actions. The control they thought they had was an illusion propped up by your participation. When you stop participating, the illusion shatters, and they are left standing in the rubble of a dynamic they can no longer manipulate. Think about what you provided for them. You were a source of unwavering stability, of consistent emotional support, of predictable warmth. For someone with an avoidant attachment style whose internal world is often a tumultuous sea of fear and self-doubt, your stability was like a drug. It was a substance they could periodically tap into to regulate their own emotional state without ever having to truly commit to the source. They were emotional tourists in your world of commitment, taking snapshots of intimacy and then retreating to the safety of their own emotional borders to process the overwhelm. You were their comfort, their validation, their proof that they were lovable, all without the terrifying risk of true, enmeshed interdependence. When you cut off the supply, you are forcing them to go cold turkey from this drug. The initial relief they might feel, the finally, space and freedom, is short-lived. It is quickly replaced by the gnawing pangs of withdrawal. The stability is gone. The consistent validation has vanished. The comforting hum of your presence in their life, even in the background, has been replaced by a deafening silence. They are now forced to sit with themselves in their own unregulated emotional state without their primary coping mechanism, you. This is where the real discomfort begins. This is where the itch starts, the anxiety creeps in, the mind begins to race. They start to feel a loneliness that is different from the solitude they so fiercely protected. This is a profound, echoing loneliness that highlights the emptiness of their own strategies. They begin to realize that the freedom they fought for was actually a prison of their own making, and the safety of their walls has now become a suffocating cage. The drug is gone, and their system is screaming for a fix. They will be tempted to find a replacement, a new source of stability to latch onto, but it will feel hollow, because it wasn't just any stability they were addicted to, it was yours. It was the specific way you loved them, the particular brand of patience you exhibited, the unique light you brought into their life. This withdrawal phase is critical. It is the period where the fantasy of their independence collides with the harsh reality of their need for connection. It's a painful, disorienting process, and it is the necessary crucible in which their true realization begins to form. In the dynamic you shared, your voice was likely a constant. It was the voice of reason, the voice of pleading, the voice of questions, the voice of trying to figure it out. You provided the noise that distracted from the core issue. Your attempts to communicate, to connect, to resolve, created a soundtrack that played over the silent, gaping wound of their avoidance. When you remove your voice, when you stop the questions and the pleading, all that is left is the silence. And in that silence, their own thoughts, fears, and self-recriminations become deafening. You have effectively placed them in an echo chamber of their own making. Every justification they had for pulling away, I need space, they're too needy, this is just who I am, now echoes back at them, but this time without your voice to argue against it. The echo starts to sound hollow. The excuses begin to ring false. The narrative they built, where they were the self-sufficient hero resisting the clutches of enmeshment, begins to crumble under the weight of a simple, undeniable fact: you are gone. And you are gone not because you were too needy, but because they were unavailable. The silence forces them to become their own interlocutor. They start to ask themselves the questions you used to ask. Why am I like this? What am I so afraid of? Was it really that bad? The silence is no longer a comfortable blanket. It is a mirror reflecting back their own emptiness. It is the ultimate teacher because it offers no easy answers, only uncomfortable questions. There is no one to blame, no one to project onto, no one to deflect with. It is just them, alone with the consequences of their behavior. This is a profoundly unsettling experience for an avoidant whose entire defense system is built around avoiding exactly this kind of deep, internal reflection. The silence you have imposed through your absence becomes the catalyst for a level of self-confrontation they have spent a lifetime running from. It is in this quiet, brutal space that the first seeds of genuine insight are planted. Human psychology has a fascinating and often cruel tendency. We rarely appreciate the true value of something until it is gone. For the avoidant, who was often focused on what they were losing, autonomy, freedom, independence by being with you, your constant presence made your qualities seem like a given. Your loyalty was expected. Your patience was taken for granted. Your love was a baseline, not a privilege. It was the background noise of their life. But when you disappear, that background noise stops and the sudden quiet is jarring. It is in this void that retroactive realization begins to dawn. It's like a movie flashback, but instead of seeing happy memories, they see all the moments they took for granted. They remember the time they were sick and you dropped off soup without being asked. They recall the way you celebrated their small victories. They think about the safety they felt, even in their discomfort, just knowing you were there. Your value, which was diluted by its constant availability, suddenly becomes concentrated and potent in its absence. They start to compare. They go on a date with someone new, and that person doesn't laugh at their obscure jokes the way you did. They face a problem at work, and there's no one to talk to who understands their context the way you did. They have a bad day, and there is no safe harbor to retreat to. The new people they meet are just that new. They lack the depth, the history, the earned trust, the substance that you represented. The avoidant begins a mental inventory, and for the first time, they are counting the cost not of being with you, but of losing you. They realize that what they perceived as neediness was actually your capacity for deep connection. What they labeled drama was your legitimate emotional response to their inconsistency. Your value becomes crystal clear in the harsh light of hindsight, and it is a painful clarity. They see the imbalance of the relationship not from their skewed perspective, but from the objective reality of what you offered and what they failed to reciprocate. This retroactive realization is a gut punch that often marks the turning point from mild curiosity to genuine panic. As the discomfort grows and the retroactive realization sets in, the avoidance ego kicks into survival mode. The ego cannot tolerate the idea that it made a catastrophic error in judgment, that it drove away someone of immense value. To fully admit that would be to shatter the ego's carefully constructed self-image of being self-sufficient, logical, and in control. So it devises a strategy, the breadcrumb. This is a low-investment, low-risk probe designed to test the waters. It's a text at 11 p.m. It's a like on an old social media photo. It's a comment about a shared memory, sent with a casualness that belays its true intention. The breadcrumb is not an apology. It is not a declaration of love. It is not a plea to come back. It is a reconnaissance mission. The ego's goal is simple: to see if you are still on the hook. Are you still orbiting their universe? Will you bite? Will you provide the validation, the attention, the reassurance that they are still desirable and that the door is still open? If you respond with enthusiasm, if you engage, if you show that you've been waiting for this very moment, the ego gets its fix. It confirms the old narrative. See, they're still there. I didn't lose them. I'm still in control. My actions didn't have permanent consequences. It gives them a momentary hit of relief, enough to soothe their anxiety, and it allows them to retreat back into their shell. Mission accomplished. They got what they needed. Validation, without having to risk any real vulnerability. This is a critical juncture for you. Your response to the breadcrumb will determine the entire trajectory of what happens next. Engaging with the breadcrumb resets the entire toxic cycle. It tells them that your absence was not a permanent state of being, but a temporary protest, a tactic to get their attention. It teaches them that they can have access to you without ever having to change. Therefore, the only empowered response is to not respond at all, or to respond with a level of polite, detached indifference that mirrors their past behavior. This refusal to play the game throws their ego into a tailspin, escalating their anxiety and pushing them toward the next, more desperate phase. The avoidance world is, in a strange way, built on the certainty of your relevance to them. Even when they devalued you, your presence was a testament to their own desirability. You were proof that they were capable of attracting and holding someone's interest. When you disappear and stay disappeared, ignoring their breadcrumbs, a new, more terrifying fear begins to emerge: the panic of irrelevance. This is compounded exponentially if they get wind that you are moving on. Maybe they see a picture of you looking happy and carefree with friends. Maybe they hear you've started a new hobby. Maybe, and this is the ultimate trigger, They see a hint that you might be seeing someone else. This is their worst nightmare realized. The thought that you are healing, growing, and potentially transferring the love and energy they took for granted to someone else is an existential threat to their ego. It forces them to confront the fact that their chapter in your life is closing. You are not just sitting at home pining for them, you are actively writing a new story, and they are not in it. They are becoming a footnote in your history while you are a central character in theirs. This panic is not purely about missing you. It's about the terrifying prospect of no longer mattering. It's the fear of being replaced, forgotten, and rendered obsolete. The person who was once their stable source of validation is now validating themselves and potentially receiving validation from a new source. This shatters the fantasy that they could always come back when they were ready. The door they assumed would always be open is now visibly closing, and the light from the other side is getting brighter, and it's a light they are no longer part of. This panic is a powerful motivator. It can trigger the hoovering attempt, a sudden, intense effort to suck you back into their orbit, not necessarily out of genuine, healed love, but out of a desperate need to reclaim their relevance and soothe the massive injury to their ego. In the absence of a real, substantial connection with you, the avoidant often retreats into a fantasy. This fantasy can take two forms: the fantasy of the perfect, low-pressure relationship they believe is out there, or the fantasy of their own self-sufficient perfection without the burden of a partner. When they lose you and attempt to actualize these fantasies, they inevitably face a brutal collision with reality. They may try to date other people, seeking that effortless connection without the baggage they projected onto you. But what they quickly discover is that the new people are, well, new. They don't have the shared history. They don't have the deep understanding. They don't have the resilience that you built through weathering their storms. The new connections feel superficial, fragile, and unsatisfying. The avoidant finds themselves having to start from scratch, but now with the added burden of their own patterns, and without the patient, forgiving love you offered. They start to compare, and the comparison is stark. Your love was deep, weathered, and real. The new person's love is conditional, untested, and shallow. Your arguments, as painful as they were, came from a place of caring enough to fight for the relationship. With new people, conflict feels petty and meaningless. The fantasy of the easy relationship collapses under the weight of the truth. All real, meaningful relationships require work, vulnerability, and emotional risk. The other fantasy, that of blissful independence, also crumbles. The silence they once craved now feels like isolation. The freedom they prized feels like loneliness. They realize that the burden of your love was actually a gift, a tether to the human experience that they now find themselves adrift from. This collapse of the fantasy is a moment of profound disillusionment. It is the death of the idealized alternative they held in their mind, the alternative that made staying with you seem like a compromise. With that fantasy gone, they are left staring at the raw, unvarnished truth. They had something genuine and substantial, and they systematically dismantled it out of fear. Driven by the panic of irrelevance and the collapse of their fantasies, the avoidant often launches what is known as a hoovering attempt, named after the Hoover vacuum cleaner, as they try to suck you back in. This is different from the low-investment breadcrumb. This is a full-scale, emotionally charged campaign. It can look like a long, heartfelt text message apologizing for their behavior. It can be a declaration of how much they've missed you and how they've finally seen the light. It can be grand gestures, promises of change, and a showering of the attention you craved for so long. This is the moment where your resolve will be tested like never before. It feels so good to finally be seen, to finally be heard, to finally get the validation you were starving for. But you must understand the psychology behind the Hoover. It is often born not from a place of genuine, lasting transformation, but from a place of intense anxiety, loss, and ego injury. It is the pullback before the final realization. They are trying to regain the stability and relevance they lost. They are trying to reset the system to its old, familiar settings because the new reality without you is too painful to bear. If you take them back at this stage without them having done the deep, independent, internal work required for lasting change, you are almost certainly signing up for a repeat of the cycle. The old patterns will re-emerge because the Hoover is often a reaction to pain, not a commitment to a new way of being. It's a Hail Mary pass to avoid hitting rock bottom. Your power in this moment lies in your ability to see the Hoover for what it is, a symptom of their crisis, not a testament to your value. Your response, or lack thereof, will determine everything. Holding your boundary and not allowing yourself to be sucked back in forces them to sit with the full consequences of their actions. It denies them the easy fix and pushes them toward the only thing that can create real change, the final, sobering reckoning with themselves. Throughout this entire process, the single most important variable is you, not what they are doing, not what they are thinking, but the state of your own being. The ultimate power you wield in this dynamic is an unshakable frame of self-worth and ultimately indifference. I'm not talking about a bitter, angry indifference. I'm talking about a calm, centered, and resolute indifference that comes from a deep knowing of your own value. It is the understanding that your peace is more valuable than their presence. It is the realization that your life is a grand, beautiful tapestry, and they were merely a thread that, when removed, does not cause the whole thing to unravel, but allows for a new, even more vibrant thread to be woven in. Your indifference is your fortress. When they breadcrumb, your indifference is the moat that keeps them out. When they hoover, your indifference is the unbreachable wall. It communicates one simple, devastating message. You no longer have the power to affect my emotional state. My happiness, my validation, my sense of self is generated from within. I am the source. This is the ultimate role reversal. You are no longer the anxious participant reacting to their every move. You have become the stable, self-contained force that they now orbit. Your indifference is not for them, it is for you. It is the protective barrier you build around your own healing heart. It is the space you create for yourself to grieve, to grow, and to glow again. It is the living embodiment of the truth that you are a whole person, complete and worthy, with or without them. This unshakable frame is what makes your absence permanent and powerful. It is what transforms your loss into their lesson and your liberation. This is the grand finale, the beautiful, powerful outcome of your immense strength. The story does not end with them. It ends with you. When an avoidant loses access to you, the most important thing that happens next is not what they do, it's what you become. Their loss becomes the fertile ground for your unstoppable evolution. The pain you endured was not in vain, it was the fire that forged a stronger, wiser, more resilient version of you. You learn the invaluable lesson of self-love. You learn to set boundaries that are non-negotiable. You learn to recognize your own worth so deeply that you would never again allow someone to treat you as an option. You reclaim your time, your energy, your passion, and you pour it back into yourself. You level up in your career, you deepen your friendships, you rediscover old passions and ignite new ones. You begin to live a life so full, so vibrant, so aligned with your purpose, that the memory of that old dynamic feels like a distant, faint echo from a past life. You evolve into a person that the old you wouldn't even recognize, a person who demands and commands respect, love, and consistency. And as you stand in this new, powerful space, you realize the greatest truth of all. Their loss was not your tragedy, it was your graduation. It was the universe's brutal but effective way of removing what was blocking you from becoming who you were always meant to be. You are no longer defined by their avoidance. You are defined by your own profound and unstoppable evolution. So, what truly happens when an avoidant loses access to you? It's not a story of petty revenge or a game of who misses who more. It is a profound psychological and emotional unraveling that forces a confrontation with the self. It is the shattering of an illusion of control, the painful withdrawal from the drug of your stability, and the deafening lessons taught in the echo chamber of silence. It is the slow dawning and agonizing realization of your value, not as a present convenience, but as a profound absence. This journey is marked by the ego's desperate attempts to regain footing, from testing the waters with breadcrumbs to the full-blown panic of watching you become irrelevant to their story while they remain stuck in the chapter they wrote with you. It culminates in the collapse of the fantasies they held about easier loves and a more perfect freedom, forcing them to see the raw, unvarnished truth of the substantial connection they systematically dismantled. But let me be unequivocally clear, the most important character in this entire transformation is not the avoidant. It is you. Your power, your healing, your evolution is the central theme of this story. Your ultimate strength is revealed not in your reaction to their hoovering attempts, but in your cultivated state of unshakable indifference. A calm, centered fortress of self-worth that communicates your wholeness and your irrevocable decision to prioritize your own peace. This journey you have been on, as heart-wrenching as it has been, is the catalyst for your greatest becoming. The loss they experienced was the necessary fuel for your unstoppable rise. You have learned to generate your own validation, to enforce your own boundaries, and to love yourself with a ferocity that no outside force can ever diminish. You have turned your pain into power and your waiting into wisdom. Therefore, do not watch what happens next for them. Watch what happens next for you. Watch as you build a life so magnificent, so full of purpose and passion, that the old dynamic becomes a faded memory, a lesson learned that propelled you to a destiny far greater than you could have imagined while tethered to that source of inconsistency and pain. You are not a victim of their avoidance. You are a graduate of it. You have passed the ultimate test of self-love. You have reclaimed your energy, your spirit, and your life. And now, armed with this hard-won wisdom and this unshakable strength, you step forward into a future where you will never again settle for crumbs when you are the entire feast. Your story is no longer about what you lost to an avoidant. It is about everything you found within yourself. Thank you for having the courage to listen to this, for having the strength to confront these truths, and for having the faith in yourself to know that you deserve more. Your journey to reclaiming your power starts with a single decision. Make that decision today. Go out there and build a life you are obsessed with. I believe in you. Now go and make it happen. Goodbye.